feel it's going to be a huge game changer. And I have seen on more than one occasion people asking me if it is possible to do with, and for sure this is going to be a game-changing feature, and I'm pretty sure this feature is going to be implemented very soon. It's going to be a game changer. It's definitely going to set your app apart in a sea of many other lookalike apps that all look and function the same. That's going to be an awesome feature and a game-changing feature as well. Now, I've been doing no code for over 4 years, and if there's one thing that I learned is that all tools are somewhat unique. Yes, all of them try to get you to the final objective, which is to allow you to build a great app. But still, you may be using one tool with a bunch of features that you really like, and then find another tool that you like, but that tool unfortunately does not have the features of these other tools that you are used to. Nevertheless, if I had to pick one tool to build an app today, it would definitely be Flutterflow, which is my absolute favorite no-code tool right now. But while Flutterflow is awesome, it's not exactly perfect. And so in today's video, I want to talk about features that a no-code tool needs to have to make it truly unrivaled. One that would allow you to build super powerful apps and still will be very easy to use. And believe it or not, these game-changing features are coming a lot sooner than you think. Now, one of the features that I quickly came to love when I started building apps with no code is the existence of a built-in database. So for example, if you're using a tool such as Bubble or Adalo, they give you a built-in database that you can immediately start populating with data that you can use with your apps. And this made it super easy to hit the ground running and start building your app, because you knew that you have access to a built-in database and you don't need to go out and configure this third-party resource, get the connections ready, work on your permissions. It's there and you can start using it very quickly. This is a feature I really like with Bubble and Adalo, and unfortunately with Flutterflow you do not have this feature. Now, you can kind of get around this if you're using app state with persistence along with data types, but it's still not ideal. It would have been really awesome if we had a feature to create a local database along with maybe relationships that we can use for our apps. Now, even though Flutterflow does not have a built-in database, it's still relatively easy to get started, thanks to the fact that it has built-in support for Firestore DB as well as Supabase. But what if you're not using Firestore DB, and what if you're not using Supabase? What if you're using something like Pocketbase or something like Xano or something like SQLite? What do you do in this case? Well, in that case, it gets a little bit more complicated. And that is why another really solid feature is for a no-code tool to have adapters that allow you to connect to just about any other backend database, whatever it may be. So for instance, you're interested in using Pocketbase. Well, there's going to be an adapter that allows you to easily connect to Pocketbase. Or maybe you want to use Xano. Well, there's going to be an adapter that you can configure in order to connect Xano. And that is going to be the case for just about any popular or just about any database out there, such as SQLite, MySQL, MariaDB, etc. There are tons and tons of different databases, and so it would have been really nice for the no-code tool to know how to connect to each one of these data backends and access the data seamlessly inside of your app. Now, one of the main reasons I really came to love Flutterflow is that along with lots of these built-in widgets, Flutterflow also gives you the ability to leverage advanced widgets. So for instance, you can leverage things like swipeable deck or a swipeable card. So you can build apps like Tinder, flashcards, etc. There's some really interesting widgets that give your app a new level of responsiveness and interactivity. And while that is awesome, they still need to go further and give you the ability to build complex apps with complex widgets. So for instance, in one of my projects that I'm working on right now, I'm making use of this Kanban card type board. So for instance, we have here a board with different columns, and I have these cards that I can drag and drop in various columns. And this is excellent functionality that I'm pretty sure many of you would love to leverage if you're building a similar app. But unfortunately, you can't do this with Flutterflow out of the box. And I don't know any other no-code builder that allows you to implement this advanced functionality. With Flutterflow, you would need to write some custom code. And I'm not even sure if you can do something like this with a lot of these other popular no-code builders. And so it would have been really nice if you can implement some of this advanced functionality right out of the box without needing to roll your sleeves and write the actual code. Now, another reason I really like Flutterflow is because it leverages the Flutter framework. Now, Flutter framework is very, very powerful because it's built from the ground up to allow you to design, test, and launch UI-driven apps quickly and easily. So as you're building your apps here in Flutterflow, you are trying to assemble different widgets together and get them work cohesively as an app. And as you're building your UI, you can enhance your app with some animation functionality. So for instance, I can click on this button and I can easily add some kind of animation to it. So if I click on animation, I can do a fade, slide, scale, and rotate. Now, this is great and all, but what a lot of people don't realize is that the Flutter framework includes some very, very powerful animation capabilities. So along with these 4 animation types, you can do hundreds of other animations. You can essentially get your app to animate exactly how you want it to happen beyond fading, sliding, scaling, and rotate. You can create color animations. You can create gradient animations. You can create simple animations. You can create complex animations. And so it would have been really nice to be able to come in and say, well, I have this button and I wanted to animate it in a certain way. I wanted to move along the screen. I wanted to change colors. I wanted to change directions. I wanted to do something more complex than I am able to do using these options here. And believe me, adding subtle or not so subtle animations in your app as something is happening in your app is definitely going to set your app apart in a sea of many, many other lookalike apps that all look and function the same. Another really awesome feature that I quickly came to appreciate about Flutterflow that many other no-code tool builders do not have is the fact is when you are developing your app and you are done with the app, you like how the app looks, well, you can easily view and or export source code. So here I am inside the app here that I'm developing, and all I need to do is click here in the developer menu and I can view this code. And right away, Flutterflow generates the source code for me. Now, this is Flutter code, and this is what's happening under the hood. And thankfully, because I'm using Flutterflow, I do not need to write this code by hand, which is the main benefit to using a no-code builder. And I can also download this code, and as a result, I will have a standalone Flutterflow app. Now, unfortunately, it's not possible to do the reverse. So for instance, let's say I have a Flutter project somewhere that I may have been working on myself, or I gotten it from somebody else, or it's an open source project. What I cannot do is I can't import this project into Flutterflow. Now, Flutter itself is open source, so as you can guess, there's a ton of different Flutter open source projects that can be very, very useful if you're building a similar app. So for instance, here I'm on a page that has 19 free open source Flutter projects and samples. And so as I'm looking through this list, if I realize that maybe I want some of the functionality that's in one of these open source projects, and I want to have that functionality inside the app that I'm building in Flutterflow, well, I can't really leverage this functionality because I can't really import this project into Flutterflow. So a truly killer feature would be to take an existing Flutter project and import it into your no-code builder. And that way you can either take an existing open source project, import it here and start looking at it and kind of tinkering and as you're building your app. Or you can start building an app here in Flutterflow, import another project, and then check and compare different functionality and borrow some of the functionality from this other project into the app that you're building. I feel it's going to be a huge game changer. And I have seen on more than one occasion people asking me if it is possible to do with Flutterflow. And unfortunately, the answer is no. But I feel this is something that's going to be available in not so distant future. And for sure, this is going to be a game-changing feature. The next feature is a feature that I really enjoyed when I used an app builder called AppGyver. And this feature is called real-time data binding. And so the idea with this feature is that as you're designing your app and you're putting on various components that display various pieces of data, the idea is that you can have a component connect to another component or to another data source and have it linked, which means that if something happens to that data source, the target component would be immediately updated. Now, I really like that feature in AppGyver, and unfortunately, when I stopped using AppGyver, I really wasn't able to find another no-code tool that implements this feature as seamlessly as AppGyver did. Now, Flutterflow comes very close. So in certain situations, you can create a certain widget that gets data from elsewhere, and that widget will automatically update its own UI as soon as the data changes. So for instance, if you have a widget that's tied to Firebase's Firestore and some of the data changes there, well, that widget's UI will automatically update. Another situation is when you are linking a widget to App Store with Flutterflow. In certain situations, when you update your app state or page state, that value that the widget is displaying will automatically update as well. But this is where the magic ends, because as soon as you start using different data sources, so for instance, if you were to create a list that gets your data from Supabase or an API call or somewhere else, and that source data changes, your data is not going to automatically update. You will have to refresh the app and you will have to refetch the data in order for the data to update. Another thing that you really can't do seamlessly is being able to connect two widgets together. So for instance, if I have a text widget and I have a text field, I can't really tie them together. I can't really have a situation where I am updating a input field here and it's going to automatically update the data there. I can kind of do it with app state, but unfortunately I can't do it directly. And so one feature that I would really love for a tool such as Flutterflow to implement seamlessly is a two-way binding. I want to be able to connect one field to another, and then if one field changes some of the data, I want that change to be immediately reflected in another field. And so once this feature is implemented, and I'm pretty sure this feature is going to be implemented very soon, it's going to be a game changer to how your apps behave, because they're going to be a lot more reactive, and as a result your users are going to love you a lot more. Another feature that I think is going to be an absolute game changer for no-code tool is a feature that I called State Management Visualizer. So let me explain to you how that would work. So for instance, let's say you have a situation where you are asking input from the user. So here you have a text input field. Here you might have something status, you're displaying some status, and then you have a button that allows the user to submit this information. Now, if you're building a web app or a mobile app or any kind of an app that interacts with the user, typically the way this is going to work is this UI here is going to be transformed into different states. So as I'm looking at this UI, I immediately see three states. The first state is this initial state, and this is what the user sees before they start inputting something. Another state is what happens when the user presses this button here. So you might have some kind of a spinning circle or some kind of a waiting state or something that tells the user that, hey, we are working on your request. Wait a couple of moments, wait a couple of seconds until we get the data that you're looking for. And then finally, the last state here would be the state where we are actually displaying the data to the users. And so right away, I see minimum of 3 states for this very, very simple form. Of course, you might have another state, which is what's going to be displayed if the user enters the wrong data here. So if they enter something and it is incorrect, you might have to show them an error. You might have to tell them, hey, you entered this incorrect, or there's no access, forbidden, etc., etc. And so as you're building your app, you're going to have many screens, and you're going to have screens that take input from users, and these screens are going to automatically have different states. Now, with a lot of these no-code builders, you have to worry about the states yourself. So as I'm building this, I have to decide, well, what's going to happen, and I have to create the appropriate state. But wouldn't it be great if all of this functionality was actually built into a no-code builder? So for instance, here I am inside of Flutterflow. Wouldn't it be great if, I can immediately create the 3 or 4 states or even more for this UI screen here? And I can say, well, this is my initial state, this is my waiting state, and this is my error state, and this is my successful state, right? Wouldn't it be awesome if I can do this right here using some UI elements where I can create multiple screens or multiple logic to essentially anticipate these state changes, because that is exactly what's going to happen when users are going to start using your app and inputting the data. And so right now, none of the no-code app builders actually allow you to manage these states in a very UI friendly way. You still kind of have to code it out, right? You still have to have your conditions. You might have to create multiple conditions. You might have to create a stack. You might have to create a bunch of other widgets, but it's not easy to actually sit down and map out your state so that you can see in front of you what's going to happen after user tries to enter some kind of information. And so I feel being able to do all this state management visually, it's going to be an absolute game-changing feature because nobody else is doing it. And this is something that developers do all the time. And so I definitely look forward to being able to use this feature in a very no-code friendly, visually friendly way. It's definitely going to be a game changer. And last but not least, it would be definitely awesome if we can leverage UI for many of the things that we are doing when we are building our app. So for instance, here inside of Flutterflow, I can click on this button here, and it's going to ask me for a prompt to generate a page. And the idea is I can simply tell it, okay, I'm looking for a list page, I'm looking for a detail page, I'm looking for an authentication page, etc., etc. And it's going to go ahead and generate the right page from the prompt. But I feel that we should be leveraging AI a lot more than what we are doing right now. So as an example, if you're developing a page that's taking input from a user, obviously this page is going to have multiple states. And so it would have been awesome if we have some kind of an AI agent that's constantly running and constantly studying what we are doing and constantly giving us some suggestions to make our app better, or perhaps to prevent some kind of mistakes, some kind of errors, some things that we might have neglected to build. So for instance, with this page that I'm building here, obviously there's going to be different states. And so it would have been great if we have some kind of, a wizard there, a helper that's going to pop up and say, hey, I noticed that you're taking input from a user and you're calling an API. Well, that API might fail, or that API can come back with an error like forbidden, or host not found, or something like that. Well, in that case, it can come back and say, hey, do you want to create an error page, or do you want to create some kind of an error field that you can tell a user that, hey, your API, your request essentially failed. And this is obviously just one example, because you're going to be building a list page here. Well, this AI agent can come back and say, hey, you're building a list page and you're getting it from this API call, or this function here, but you missed a couple of these other fields. Do you want to use these fields because they are available with the data that you're getting, right? You're fetching this data, you have access to these fields, but you're not using them. Do you want to use it? Or in the details page, okay, the same thing, okay? Maybe I have a button, or maybe I'm displaying some fields, or maybe I forgot to pass in a parameter from the list page. Well, this agent is going to come back to us and it's going to say, hey, you forgot this parameter, or there's a couple of other pieces of data that you can display, or you have this button here, but it's not linked to the correct action, or that action has errors. So essentially, it's going to look through everything. It's going to study our app, and it's going to tell us things that may go wrong, but also offer helpful suggestions that we can implement to make our app richer and more comprehensive, and ultimately, better for our users. And this AI feature is obviously going to be a lot more comprehensive than merely generating a page, because essentially it's going to look through the whole app and see if it can find some errors, some issues, or even find some enhancements or improvements that will make our app a lot better for our user. And that's going to be an awesome feature and a game-changing feature as well. And so these are my feature requests that, once implemented, would result in the perfect no-code tool. Now, do you have any interesting feature requests that you would love to see being implemented in your no-code tool of choice? If you do, let me know in the comments below. I would definitely love to hear what you have to say about some of the feature suggestions that I talked about in this video. Now, if you're watching this video, you're definitely interested in streamlining your no-code development process. Maybe you're taking no-code seriously. Maybe you're building apps for yourself, you're building apps for others, or maybe you're in the process of starting a business that's going to build apps for many clients and make you a lot of money. Well, in that case, you definitely need to check out our amazing Patreon community. If you feel that I'm providing a ton of value with these videos, well, you haven't even seen anything yet, because when you join our amazing Patreon community, you're going to get access to all my no-code apps, which means that you can view each one and you can also clone them. And so if you're building any kind of an app, or you're learning how to build no-code apps, then for sure you're going to find it very valuable. Because throughout my time on this channel, I've built tons of different apps that have all kinds of different functionalities. So chances are, if you're trying to build a particular app, I've probably built a similar app before. And so instead of reinventing the wheel, you can simply clone the app that I've already built and start enhancing it and adding some features, so that you can finish building the app that you wanted to build a lot quicker and get it to your users a lot faster. Plus, when you join our amazing Patreon community, you're going to get access to more content, such as Q&As, live streams, behind the scenes content, and our Patreon supported masterclass series, where I do deep dives on specific topics that the community votes on. And in fact, I plan to do another masterclass very shortly. The community is going to be voting on different topics that they want me to cover in depth in one of the future masterclasses. So if you do not want to miss that, and you're serious about your no-code development journey, then you definitely need to check out our amazing Patreon community and consider becoming a supporter. And you can do just that using the link in the description below the video.